The classroom fell into an eerie silence. For a split second, it was as if time had frozen. 20 pairs of eyes were locked on the small chessboard sitting on a desk in the front row. Pawns, rooks, and bishops stood like frozen soldiers. Some toppled over in defeat. One move, just one, had turned the entire match on its head. Then came the word that echoed like a thunderclap through the room. "Checkmate," whispered Amaya. Her voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The power in those 2 syllables held the force of a storm. Emily blinked at the board, stunned. She had been the school's undefeated champion for over a year. Nobody had come close until now. Amaya slowly leaned back in her chair, her fingers still hovering over the final piece she had moved, the queen. Her heart pounded in her chest like a drum, loud and heavy. But her eyes stayed calm, steady, focused. She didn't smile. Not yet. A few seconds passed. Then whispers erupted around the classroom like small wildfires. Wait, did Amaya just win? No way. She beat Emily? How did that happen? Even some of the students who weren't watching the match stood up from their desks, trying to catch a glimpse of the board. A few students clapped softly. Others looked completely baffled. Emily sat frozen, still staring at the board in disbelief. Her hand hovered over her king, which was now completely cornered with no escape. I didn't see that coming, she said under her breath, more to herself than to anyone else. Amaya didn't gloat. She didn't shout. She simply reached over, reset her bishop that had been knocked during the match, and began collecting her pieces out of habit. But before pride could bloom on her face, before the moment could become hers, a cold voice sliced through the buzz in the room. Amaya. Ms. Jenkins, their classroom teacher, stood with a frown tightening across her face. Her arms were crossed. Her gaze was fixed, not on the board, not on the game, but on Amaya herself. "There's no way you could have won that fairly," Ms. Jenkins said, loud enough for the class to hear. "Did someone help you?" The buzz in the room stopped immediately. Silence. Again, Amaya's head turned sharply. Her eyebrows knit together. For a moment, she didn't even understand what Ms. Jenkins was saying. "Help me?" she repeated softly. Ms. Jenkins stepped closer. "Emily is our best player. Everyone knows that. You're telling me you just beat her, all by yourself?" Amaya blinked. "Yes," she said, her voice calm, almost confused. But the warmth had drained from the moment. The celebration had been stolen right out of the air. Her heart, which had been swelling with victory, now began to sink with shame, even though she'd done nothing wrong. Emily spoke up. "She didn't cheat," she said. "She got me with a trap I didn't see coming." But Miss Jenkins ignored her. "Did you have your phone out during the match?" she asked Amaya. "No," Amaya said, this time a little more firmly. "Are you sure you didn't memorize a pattern or copy something from the internet?" Ms. Jenkins kept pushing, now turning toward her laptop on the desk. "I'm going to have to report this. It just doesn't add up." A few students looked at each other. One girl in the back whispered, "Why is she making such a big deal?" Another boy muttered, "That's messed up." Amaya sat still. She didn't know what to say. Her cheeks burned with embarrassment. It felt like every eye in the room was now watching her, not with admiration, but with suspicion. The same classmates who had whispered, "Whoa, and she's amazing," just a minute ago, now sat quietly, avoiding her eyes. Ms. Jenkins continued typing, not once looking back at the board that showed exactly how the game had ended, with a flawless checkmate by Amaya. "Amaya," she said again, this time in a quieter but sharper tone, "cheating is a serious offense. If this was just a joke or you had help, now is the time to say something. You won't be in trouble if you admit it." Amaya looked down at her hands. They were trembling. Her voice cracked. "I didn't cheat," she said again, but it felt like no one believed her. Miss Jenkins didn't respond. She just kept typing. Amaya wasn't just any girl in class, but to most people, she might as well have been. She sat in the third row near the window, always near the window. Not because she loved the sun or liked the view, but because it made her feel less seen, less watched. Like she could disappear when she needed to, and often she did. While the other kids laughed loudly during free time, threw paper balls when the teacher wasn't looking, and shared snacks during lunch, Amaya existed quietly in the background. She didn't have a big friend group. She didn't chase after popularity. Most days people forgot she was even there. But what nobody knew was this. Amaya saw everything. She was incredibly observant, the kind of person who noticed when someone switched seats, when a student's smile was fake, or when a teacher was having a bad day before they even said a word. She paid attention, not just to people, but to patterns. She saw how the world moved, and most of the time she stayed a few steps ahead of it. And while others spent recess running on the field, gossiping near lockers, or making TikToks by the cafeteria wall, Amaya spent her time alone, hunched over a spiral notebook. A notebook filled not with stories, but with strategies, chess strategies. She would draw little 8x8 grids and fill them with diagrams of famous endgames, puzzles, traps, counters. She'd write notes like, knight fork threat after move 3 ins or pin the bishop, expose the queen. If someone ever glanced into a notebook, they wouldn't understand a thing. But to Amaya, it was the language of brilliance, of beauty, of survival. Her love for chess began long before middle school, before teachers doubted her, before classmates ignored her, before any of it. It started in a tiny living room with a soft brown carpet and a worn-out couch where her grandfather sat with a wooden chessboard that smelled like cedar. His fingers were old and knobby, but when he moved a piece, it was like watching poetry. Chess, he used to say with a smile, isn't about luck. It's about patience, vision, and courage. Just like life. He taught Amaya the game not like she was a child, but like she was a challenger, a thinker, an equal, and she adored him for it. They played for hours every weekend. Even when he got sick and couldn't stand much, they played at the kitchen table, and he still never let her win easily. She had to earn it, and one day she did. She remembered the first time she beat him. She had moved her bishop into a spot he didn't expect, cornered his king and whispered, just like she did in class, checkmate.
He leaned back, grinned proudly, and said, "That's my girl." That was the last game they ever played.
He passed away just weeks later, and Amaya hadn't touched the chessboard for months. But eventually, she picked it back up, not because she wanted to win, but because it was the only thing that made her feel close to him. She never asked to join tournaments, and she never challenged anyone publicly. Because girls like her, quiet girls, black girls, invisible girls, weren't expected to shine in places like this. Especially not in a game people thought was meant for geniuses, so she kept her talent hidden. Until that day, until the match with Emily, the class chess queen, the unbeatable, the untouchable, the favorite. Amaya hadn't planned to challenge her. She'd only come forward when the teacher asked for someone new to play against Emily for fun. And even then she hesitated. She almost said no, but something inside her whispered, now. So she stepped forward, moved her chair, set her board, and played the game her grandfather taught her to love. Her expression was unreadable, but her eyes held something colder than disappointment, suspicion. She stood next to the chess table, her arms crossed tightly, the kind of posture that said someone was about to be put in their place. The room fell quiet again, the students unsure whether to feel proud of Amaya or brace for a lecture. Then, in a loud and almost theatrical voice, she said, "Emily, come up here." Emily stood slowly, still recovering from the surprise of losing. Her blonde hair was tied neatly in a ponytail, her uniform crisp and perfect. She didn't seem angry, just confused, maybe a little embarrassed.
"You're our top player," Ms. Jenkins said, as if trying to make sense of the impossible. "How could you lose?"
Emily gave a helpless shrug. She just beat me, she admitted. I didn't expect that last move. It caught me off guard. There was no bitterness in her voice, no excuses, just honesty. But Miss Jenkins narrowed her eyes, ignoring the girl's straightforward answer. Her gaze swung sharply toward Amaya, who was still sitting in her chair, her fingers nervously fidgeting with a chess piece. The teacher stepped closer to the board, scanning the layout of the pieces as if she were trying to uncover some hidden trick, some impossible move that no student could have made without help. Then she said it. "I'm going to report this." The words dropped like a hammer. "I think you were cheating," she added, her voice cool and firm. "You probably looked up moves on your phone while everyone was distracted." Gasps and whispers filled the room. A couple of students turned to look at Amaya. One kid muttered, "No way." Another giggled. Amaya's heart slammed against her ribs. Her lips parted, and she barely managed to say, "I didn't cheat." But Miss Jenkins was already at her desk, opening her laptop, her fingers moving swiftly over the keys. She didn't ask any further questions. She didn't check Amaya's bag. She didn't look at the board again. It was like her mind was made up from the moment Amaya declared, "Checkmate." Amaya sat frozen. Her body felt heavy and hot, as if someone had poured shame directly onto her skin. Her throat tightened, and her hands began to tremble. Emily looked over, hesitated, then said, "Miss Jenkins, I don't think she cheated. She played fair. It was a smart endgame." The teacher didn't even look up. "I'll handle this, Emily," she said sharply. "Thank you." Amaya blinked hard, trying to hold back tears. Her eyes scanned the room, hoping, just hoping, that someone might stand up for her, that one classmate might raise their hand and say, "She played an amazing game," or "She didn't even have her phone out," but no one did. Some looked away. Others stared. A few whispered to each other with wide eyes. Amaya slowly stood from her chair, each movement feeling like she was made of stone. She began gathering the chess pieces, the ones she had just used to craft the most brilliant win of her life. Now they felt like meaningless little blocks. Her notebook was still sitting open beside her, filled with hand-drawn chessboards, careful annotations, and brilliant strategies, none of which anyone had ever cared to see. How hard she worked to prepare for that one moment on the board, but no one asked. All she had done was play a fair game and win. And somehow that was a problem. Later that week, just when the weight of doubt felt heaviest on Amaya's shoulders, something unexpected happened. It started with a simple knock on the classroom door during lunch break. Amaya had been sitting alone again, her lunch untouched. Her notebook was closed, her chessboard stayed in her bag. She hadn't touched it since the incident. Winning had brought her shame instead of pride, and even the sight of her queen piece now filled her with frustration. That's when Mr. Torres, the after-school chess coach, stepped in. He was a tall man with salt and pepper hair and a calm voice that always sounded like it came with a smile. He had been working with the school's chess club for years, usually helping the same circle of known kids. But that day, his eyes landed directly on Amaya. He walked over to her table, lowered his voice, and said, "Hey, Amaya, mind joining me in the library for a quick game?" Amaya blinked. "No." He nodded. "Just for fun." She hesitated. She hadn't played since the match with Emily, since Miss Jenkins accused her, since her classmates laughed behind their hands and whispered when she walked by. "I don't know," she mumbled. Mr. Torres gently set a hand on the table and leaned down. "I heard what happened," he said softly. and I don't think you need to explain yourself to anyone, but I'd like to see you play, if you're up for it." His tone wasn't demanding. It was kind, sincere. Something in Amaya shifted. She slowly stood up, her body still tense, but her fingers curled around her bag. "Okay," she whispered. In the quiet of the school library, they sat at a corner table with an old wooden chessboard between them. It felt almost like home, like her grandfather's living room. No audience, no judgment, just the game. They played 5 matches. Amaya was rusty at first, and her nervous hands fumbled her opening in the first game. But by the second, something kicked in. By the third, her moves were sharper. By the 5th, she was smiling again. She won 3 out of 5. When the last game ended, Mr. Torres leaned back and let out a slow whistle. "I knew it," he said, eyes shining. "You're the real deal." Amaya looked down, unsure how to respond. "But they don't believe me," he smiled. "That's about to change." That afternoon, Mr. Torres didn't wait. He marched straight to the principal's office. Within the hour, he had scheduled a meeting with Amaya and the school's administration. They sat in a small conference room where Mr. Torres presented something no one had asked for before: proof. He pulled out his phone, where he had screen-recorded Amaya's matches on a digital board after their game. He explained every move she had made, broke down the strategy she used, and praised her skill. "This girl," he said, pointing at Amaya with pride, "isn't just good. She's better than most middle school players I've seen in the last 10 years, and I've coached champions." He folded his arms and added, "The accusation against her wasn't just wrong, it was unfair and biased." The principal sat in thoughtful silence. He looked at Amaya and asked gently, "Why didn't you tell anyone you played chess at this level?" Amaya shrugged, her voice quiet but clear.
No one ever asked." There was something haunting about the honesty in her words. The principal leaned forward. "Amaya, I want to personally apologize. What happened to you should never have happened. You should have been celebrated, not questioned. That's on us, and it's something I will correct." And he meant it. The next morning, Miss Jenkins stood at the front of the classroom, holding her clipboard as usual. But something was different. Her usual tone, crisp, controlled, confident, sounded strangely flat. "Class," she said, clearing her throat, "before we begin today's lesson, I have something to say." Amaya sat quietly in her seat, not sure what to expect.
Her classmates barely looked up from their notebooks and started sketching a new board. This time she wasn't hiding. Her name was finally being spoken, not with doubt, but with admiration. Then something unexpected happened again. An email arrived in the principal's inbox from the City Youth Chess League. They had heard about the incident from Mr. Torres, who sent them a clip of Amaya's recorded games and a few paragraphs about her talent. The league was hosting a citywide tournament the following month, and they wanted Amaya to compete. She'd never played in a formal competition before. She had never even been to one. When Mr. Torres told her the news, her eyes widened. "Me?" she asked softly. "You've earned it," he said. "You're more than ready." At first she hesitated. Part of her still heard Miss Jenkins' voice in the back of her mind, asking if she cheated. Part of her still felt the sting of being laughed at by her peers. What if that happened again? What if she wasn't good enough? But another part of her, stronger, clearer, braver, remembered her grandfather's words. Chess isn't about luck. It's about patience, vision, and courage. She took a deep breath, smiled, and said, "Okay, let's do it." Tournament day arrived. The venue was huge, a downtown auditorium filled with long rows of tables, each one set with perfect boards and polished timers. Kids from all over the city came with their parents, their coaches, their teams. Amaya came with her notebook, a quiet focus, and Mr. Torres by her side. But what she had won was far greater than any medal, because, for Amaya, this wasn't just about chess, this was about assumptions. about how the world often judges people by the way they look, the way they speak, the space they take up, or the silence they hold. And yet, in front of a crowd that once doubted her, she proved something powerful. That brilliance doesn't need permission. That intelligence doesn't come with a look or a label. That sometimes the quietest voice makes the loudest impact. Amaya, a quiet black girl from a school where no one expected her to shine, outthought, outplayed, and outshined nearly every opponent. Her classmates back home began to see her differently, not just as the shy girl with the notebook, but as someone with talent, courage, and depth. They started asking her for tips. Some even joined the chess club. A few apologized for how they'd treated her. Miss Jenkins never looked at her the same again. And Amaya? She didn't hold a grudge. She didn't seek revenge. She kept doing what she loved. She played. She studied. She helped others. She smiled more, because she had nothing left to prove. The respect she earned wasn't handed to her. It was won, piece by piece, game by game, with grace and brilliance. In the end, Amaya didn't just win a tournament. She changed people's minds. She challenged a system. She lit a quiet spark in every other kid who'd ever felt invisible or underestimated. She made them believe that they, too, could rise. Because, in the game of life, Amaya had made the ultimate move. She turned prejudice into power. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't fight back with anger. She simply let her brilliance speak louder than bias. Because true greatness doesn't need to shout. It moves in silence, and still, it wins. If this story inspired you, don't just scroll away. Leave a comment to show support. Hit that like button, and subscribe to my channel for more real, powerful stories that break stereotypes and lift voices that deserve to be heard. Genius comes in all forms. Strength doesn't always shout. And real power? It plays with purpose and changes the game.